Rain kept sliding down the apartment windows in slow, crooked lines that night. The kind of cold rain that made old buildings sound tired. Elena Morales had just finished putting away leftovers from the diner when she heard tires scrape hard against the curb outside. Not fast. Not reckless. Just wrong somehow. Heavy. Uneven. She looked through the blinds and saw the black SUV sitting half across the streetlight reflection with the driver door still open. For a second, she thought whoever was inside might already be dead. Then 8-year-old Mateo walked quietly beside her in sock feet and whispered, "Mom, that's the scary guy." The man had been around the neighborhood for almost 2 weeks now. Always alone. Always sitting inside the SUV late at night with the engine running. Sometimes parked outside the laundromat. Sometimes near the diner after closing. Nobody bothered him. Even ordinary people could feel what he was before learning his name. Elena told Mateo to stay inside while she stepped into the hallway. The apartment building smelled like wet concrete and old cigarettes. Rafael was halfway out of the SUV when she reached the sidewalk. He looked worse than she had ever seen him. Rain soaked through his dark coat. One hand pressed hard against his ribs while the other gripped the SUV door like he needed help standing but refused to admit it. His breathing sounded shallow, controlled too carefully. Then Mateo suddenly appeared behind her despite being told not to. The boy stared at Rafael's sleeve first. "Mom," he said quietly. "There's blood." Rafael looked down at his own arm like he had forgotten the blood was there. That was the first thing that unsettled her. Not the wound. The pause. The strange delay behind his eyes. He looked at Mateo for a long second before speaking. "You should be asleep." "Kid." Mateo frowned a little. "You said that already." Rafael stayed still. Rain tapped softly against the SUV roof. Elena felt something tighten low in her stomach because the boy was right. Rafael had said the exact same sentence less than an hour earlier outside the diner before disappearing again into the storm. But now he looked genuinely confused. Not drunk. Not distracted. Confused. Rafael blinked slowly and looked between both of them as if trying to place where he was. Then his face hardened again almost immediately. The confusion disappeared behind something colder. Trained. "I'm fine," he said. People who were fine did not shake like that. Elena moved closer before she could stop herself. "You need a hospital." "No." The answer came too fast. Mateo kept staring at the blood, soaking through Rafael's sleeve. "Does it hurt?" Rafael looked down at the child again. And for the first time since Elena had known him, something in his expression softened for a second. "I've had worse." Then he suddenly stopped speaking. His eyes drifted past them toward the apartment entrance. Elena thought maybe the pain was getting worse until Rafael asked quietly, "Did I already come here tonight?" Neither of them answered immediately because the question did not sound normal. It sounded frightened. Rafael noticed their faces too late. She could see it happen. The realization, the small flash of panic behind his eyes before he buried it again. Mateo spoke first. "You don't remember." The street became very quiet after that. Rafael looked at the boy for several seconds without answering. Then he slowly nodded once toward Elena like he was apologizing for something he could not explain. "I think," he said carefully. "I forgot part of the evening. Elena did not let Rafael into her apartment because she trusted him. She let him in because he looked like a man who might fall before the elevator doors opened. That was the difference, she kept repeating to herself, while Mateo stood in the narrow kitchen doorway, watching the dangerous man sit at their small table with rain dripping from his coat onto the floor. Rafael Vega took up too much space in the apartment without moving much at all. His shoulders were broad. His face was pale under the bruising. His silence made the room feel smaller. Elena placed a clean towel beside him. "Not in his hands. Press this against your arm." Rafael looked at the towel for a moment, before picking it up. "Too long." Again. Mateo noticed too. Rafael pressed the towel against his sleeve. "You have first aid supplies. Bathroom cabinet. Top shelf." He nodded once. Then he stood and walked toward the wrong door. Elena. Mateo whispered. That's the closet. Rafael stopped with his hand already on the knob. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Rafael turned back slowly. His face had already rebuilt itself. Right, he said. Bathroom. Elena brought the first aid kit herself. He let her clean the cut because the bleeding would not stop. But he never relaxed completely. Every muscle in him stayed half ready. As if care could turn dangerous, if he stopped paying attention. Mateo stayed near the doorway, hugging himself inside his hoodie. You forgot where the bathroom was, he said. Mateo. Elena warned softly. But Rafael only looked at the boy. There was no anger there. I haven't been inside your apartment before, Rafael said. Elena's fingers paused over the gauze. Mateo frowned. Yes. You have. Rafael looked at Elena. She could see him searching her face for confirmation. You came last week, Elena said carefully. When the pipe burst upstairs. You helped Mr. Alvarez shut off the water. Rafael looked down. A small muscle moved in his jaw. Maybe he remembered the old man. Maybe the hallway. But not standing in this kitchen. I see, he said quietly. No excuse. No explanation. Elena wrapped his arm and stepped back. You should go to an emergency room. No hospitals. You have blood loss. Confusion. And maybe a head injury. I said no. The room cooled slightly. For the first time that night, the thing around him sharpened again. Not violence exactly. A warning without raised voice. Elena met it with the tired steadiness of a woman who had already argued with landlords. Bill collectors. And sick children at 2 a.m. My son is standing 3 feet away, she said. So lower whatever that is. Rafael looked at Mateo. The change in him was quiet, but real. His shoulders eased slightly. I'm not here to scare him. Then don't. Mateo watched Rafael differently after that. Not less afraid. More curious. Rafael stayed another 20 minutes, because the bleeding needed pressure. Elena made coffee. She did not offer him until she noticed his hands shaking. When she set the mug down, he stared at it as if trying to remember whether he had asked for it. You take anything, she asked? Medication. For migraines. How often when I need it? That's not an answer. Something close to dry humor almost touched his mouth before disappearing again. I don't keep track. Elena did not like that. Men who lived by control usually remembered what they put into their bodies. Rafael reached into his coat pocket like he was looking for something. His hand stopped. Then checked the other pocket. Then the first one again. What are you looking for? Elena asked. My phone. It's on the table. Rafael looked. The phone sat beside his coffee. He had placed it there himself less than 5 minutes earlier. Mateo noticed. Elena noticed. Rafael noticed both of them noticing. He picked it up calmly. Long night, he said. No one believed him. By morning, Rafael was gone. The towel was folded neatly on the table. The mug was rinsed and placed upside down beside the sink. The apartment door was locked from the inside, meaning he had left through the fire stairs and somehow made sure the latch caught behind him. Elena stood in the kitchen before sunrise, staring at the empty chair where he had sat. Mateo still slept on the couch under a thin blanket. The city outside looked washed and gray. She told herself not to think about Rafael Vega. People like him did not become problems by accident. But at lunch, while Elena refilled coffee at the diner, Rafael appeared in the last booth by the window. No entrance, she noticed. Just there. His coat was dry now. His face composed. The bandage hidden beneath his sleeve. He looked less like a wounded man and more like the version of himself people crossed streets to avoid. Elena walked over with the coffee pot. You shouldn't be here. I need breakfast. You need a doctor. I need breakfast. She poured the coffee because refusing would only make the conversation longer. Rafael watched the street outside. "You working a double?" he asked. Elena's hand tightened slightly around the coffee pot. "I told you that last night." He turned his head. That small blank space appeared again behind his eyes. Then his jaw tightened. "You did," he said, like he was forcing the statement into place. Elena lowered her voice. "How often does this happen? Nothing is happening. You forgot my bathroom. You forgot your phone was in front of you. You forgot asking about my shift." Rafael looked around the diner before answering. "Sometimes I lose minutes," he said quietly. The honesty surprised her. Then he added, "Not hours. That's supposed to make me feel better. It wasn't for you." There was the wall again, but now she had seen what stood behind it. Fear did not make Rafael louder. It made him quieter. Mateo arrived after school because Mrs. Alvarez dropped him off at the diner when Elena worked late. The boy slid into the booth across from Rafael before Elena could stop him. "You came back," Mateo said. Rafael looked at him. "I said I would." Mateo tilted his head. "No. You didn't." A small silence opened between them. Elena felt her chest tighten. Rafael looked from Mateo to her again. And this time, he did not hide the confusion quickly enough. "I didn't," he asked. Mateo shook his head. "You left before breakfast." Rafael's gaze dropped to the table. The boy reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded drawing. It showed a black car. Rain. A stick figure man with a red line on one arm. And a small apartment with yellow windows. "I made this because Mom said I shouldn't talk about you at school." "Mateo," Elena said softly. Rafael did not take the drawing at first. He only looked at it, like it was proof of a night his mind had already started misplacing. Finally, he accepted it carefully. "Your mother is right," he said. "Because you're dangerous." Rafael looked at Elena. She expected him to deny it for the child. He did not. "Yes." Mateo absorbed that with the serious expression children wore when deciding whether honesty made someone safer or scarier. "But you didn't yell when I said you forgot stuff." "No. My dad used to yell when he forgot things." Elena went still. Rafael did too. It was not a dramatic confession. Mateo said it the way children said things they carried too long without understanding the weight. Elena set plates down in front of them. "Eat your fries." Mateo obeyed. Mostly because he sensed he had stepped into something tender. Rafael folded the drawing once and placed it carefully inside his coat pocket. Then he looked back toward the window again. But his reflection had changed slightly. Less distant. More tired. Before leaving, he stood beside the booth for one extra second. "Mateo," he said. The boy looked up. Rafael paused slightly before saying the name. Tiny hesitation. But enough. Mateo smiled anyway because Rafael had remembered it at all. Elena noticed, and Rafael knew she noticed. That evening, after closing, Elena found Rafael's coffee untouched at the booth. Cold. Full. Beside it, half hidden beneath the napkin dispenser, sat a blister pack of pills with 2 empty spaces punched through the foil. No label. No bottle. Just medication carried loose by a man who claimed he did not keep track. Elena picked it up carefully and stared at it under the tired fluorescent lights of the diner. Outside, Rafael's black SUV was already gone. But for the first time, what scared her most was not that Rafael Vega might come back. It was that one day he might not remember why. 3 nights later, Elena woke just after 2 in the morning because someone was sitting on the apartment stairs outside. Not knocking. Not moving. Just there. At first she thought it might be one of the tenants smoking again. But then she heard the slow scrape of a shoe against concrete, followed by silence that felt too controlled to belong to a drunk neighbor. She checked on Mateo first. Always Mateo first. The boy was asleep under tangled blankets on the couch, while cartoons played quietly on low volume because he hated sleeping in complete silence when Elena worked late. Only after making sure he was safe did she move toward the door. She looked through the peephole. Rafael sat on the stairwell, landing one floor below with both elbows resting on his knees. His dark coat was folded beside him, one hand pressed against his forehead beneath the weak hallway light. He looked older tonight. Not physically, just worn down somewhere deeper. Elena opened the door halfway. What happened? Rafael lowered his hand slowly, like he needed a second to understand where her voice came from. Nothing. You're sitting in a stairwell at 2 a.m. I didn't want to wake the kid. That answer unsettled her more than she expected. Not because it sounded kind, because it sounded considered. Rafael Vega thought about Mateo before knocking. Elena stepped into the hallway. Did somebody follow you here? No. You sure? His eyes lifted toward her. I'm always sure. The sentence should have sounded confident. Instead, it sounded rehearsed. She noticed his hands trembling again. Rafael rubbed one hand against his jaw slowly. I needed somewhere quiet for a minute. You have somewhere safer than this. Rafael stared down the dark stairwell. Safe and quiet aren't always the same thing. That stayed with her longer than she wanted. After a while, Rafael asked, What day is it? Elena frowned. Thursday. His eyes closed briefly. Not relief. Calculation. Like he had been checking something against missing time. You didn't know that I've been awake a while. That doesn't answer the question. Rafael opened his eyes again. Calmer now because he had already rebuilt the walls around himself. I lose track sometimes. You mean your memory? No. What do you call it then? He looked at her for several seconds before answering. Fatigue. Elena almost argued. But she had known enough exhausted men to recognize when pride mattered more than honesty. Pushed too hard, and they disappeared entirely. She sat down one stair above him instead. Not close enough to touch. Close enough to hear his breathing. After another minute, she said, Mateo thinks you like him. A faint line appeared between Rafael's brows. Why would he think that you came back? That answer landed somewhere deeper than she intended. Rafael looked down at his hands. I shouldn't. Probably not. And you still opened the door. Elena gave a tired shrug. You looked half dead. Something close to a smile almost appeared before disappearing again. The hallway fell quiet. Then Rafael asked, His father around? There was no curiosity in the question. Only caution. No. He leave. Elena stared ahead at the peeling paint across the hallway. Something like that. Rafael nodded once and did not ask further. That, strangely, made her trust him a little more. The apartment door creaked open behind them. Mateo stood there barefoot and sleepy. Blanket wrapped around his shoulders. You're back again, he mumbled. Rafael turned his head. And something about the way exhaustion disappeared from his face when he saw the child made Elena's stomach tighten unexpectedly. You should be asleep, Rafael said. Mateo pointed immediately. You already used that one. For the first time since Elena had met him, Rafael actually looked embarrassed. I need new material, he muttered. Mateo grinned sleepily and walked down one step before Elena stopped him with a hand against his shoulder. Bill, but now. The boy sighed dramatically, but obeyed after Rafael gave a slight nod toward the apartment. Once the door shut again, Rafael stared at the floor for a long moment. What Elena asked. You looked relieved when he corrected you. Rafael's jaw tightened faintly. No, I didn't. Elena let the lie pass. Because he had. And worse than that, he probably knew he had. A few minutes later, his phone vibrated inside his coat pocket. Rafael checked the screen. Everything in him changed almost instantly. Not fear. Distance. The emotional walls returned so fast it felt like watching a door slam shut. He stood. Elena. The way he said her name made her realize something. He remembered it immediately this time. No hesitation. No searching. You should go inside, he said. Why, I won't ask twice. There it was again. That other version of him. The one the neighborhood saw from behind tinted windows and silence. Elena looked down the stairwell instinctively. Nothing. Just shadows. You expecting someone? No. Then why are you acting like this? Rafael slipped the phone back into his pocket. Because sometimes staying near me too long becomes expensive. He picked up his coat. Then he stopped halfway down the stairs and frowned slightly. His hand moved slowly to his pocket again. The phone. He had already forgotten putting it away. Elena saw the exact second he realized she noticed. Something cold passed behind his eyes then, panic forced under control. Rafael descended the rest of the stairs without another word. Elena waited until the building door shut below before returning inside. Mateo was still awake under the blanket. He looked sad. The boy whispered. Elena locked the apartment door carefully. People like him don't stay sad, she said automatically. But even while saying it, she remembered Rafael sitting alone beneath the flickering hallway light, asking what day it was, and she realized she no longer believed her own answer. The next afternoon, Elena found herself checking the diner windows every time a black SUV passed outside. Not because she wanted Rafael to return, because she was beginning to fear what might happen if one day he didn't remember how. Rafael disappeared for 4 days. Not unusual for a man like him, but unusual for Elena now. That was the problem. She realized it Tuesday morning, while pouring burnt coffee into diner mugs under fluorescent lights that made everyone look exhausted. She kept glancing toward the windows every time headlights slowed outside. Her body had already started expecting him, before her mind agreed to admit it. That irritated her more than his absence did. She did not want routines involving men like Rafael Vega. Routines became attachments. Attachments became liabilities. Still. She noticed things. Mateo asking if the SUV guy was sick again. The untouched booth near the window. The strange quiet settling over the apartment hallway at night, without Rafael sitting somewhere nearby pretending not to rest. On the 5th night, Elena returned home just after midnight carrying leftover diner soup because groceries were running low again. Mateo had fallen asleep against Mrs. Pardovan. Alvarez's shoulder upstairs while waiting for her shift to end. She unlocked the apartment door and immediately stopped moving. The kitchen light was already on. Rafael sat at the table, not threatening, not hiding, just sitting there with both hands flat against the wood, like he had been trying to steady himself for a long time. Elena's fear arrived fast and cold. How did you get in here? Rafael looked up slowly. For one terrible second. He did not seem to recognize her at all. His eyes moved across her face carefully, like someone searching through damaged files. Then recognition returned. You gave me the spare key. Elena's chest tightened. No. I didn't. Silence. Rafael stared at her. Then he reached into his coat pocket and slowly placed a key on the table between them. It was her spare apartment key, the one taped beneath the old fuse box in the hallway for emergencies. She had never told him about it. You watched me hide it. She realized. Rafael lowered his eyes briefly. I think so. Think. Not know. Think. The fear inside her changed shape then. Less fear of him hurting them, more fear of something inside him slipping further away. Elena. Rafael said quietly. What day is it? Not defensive this time. Just tired. She set the soup container down slowly. Tuesday. Rafael nodded once. But his face tightened immediately afterward. Like the answer had created another problem instead of solving one. What's wrong? He looked toward the dark apartment window. I missed a meeting. You forgot. No. The denial came automatically. Empty reflex. Then he exhaled once through his nose and corrected himself. Yes. That honesty frightened her more. Because men like Rafael only admitted weakness after spending every other option. Elena stayed standing across from him. How bad is this getting? I don't know. Have you seen a doctor? No. You keep saying no, like that changes what's happening. Rafael rubbed both hands over his face slowly. My father lost his mind before he died, he said suddenly. Elena blinked. This was the most personal thing he had ever said to her. He forgot names first, then streets, then faces. Rafael stared down at the table. One day he pulled a gun on my uncle because he thought somebody broke into the house. The apartment became very still. He recognized him after Elena asked quietly. Rafael's silence answered first. Then eventually, that word settled badly between them. Elena sat down slowly across from him now, not because she trusted him completely, because he looked alone in a way she recognized too well. When did this start? She asked. I don't remember. Again. Not irone. Truth. Rafael opened one hand against the table. There were faint crescent marks in his palm where his nails had dug into the skin. I lose conversations sometimes. Small things. His voice stayed controlled. But barely. A few nights ago, I walked into a parking garage and couldn't remember where I'd been driving. Elena listened without interrupting. I knew the car was mine. I knew the gun under the seat was mine. But for maybe 30 seconds, he swallowed once. I couldn't remember where I was supposed to go. Matteo shifted in his sleep from the couch nearby. Blanket sliding partly onto the floor. Rafael's eyes moved toward the child automatically. And settled there. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. Elena noticed. Every time Rafael looked at Matteo, the confusion inside him seemed to organize itself for a moment. You should stop coming here, Elena said softly. Rafael did not look away from the boy. I know. You're carrying a gun while forgetting time. I know. My son is 8. At that, Rafael finally looked back at her, and Elena saw genuine shame move across his face for the first time. I checked the weapon 3 times downstairs, he said quietly. I remember doing that. That's supposed to help. No. The honesty again. Small. Exhausted. Human. Elena looked at the pill blister pack she had hidden earlier inside the kitchen drawer after finding it at the diner. How often do you take the migraine medication? Rafael frowned slightly. Depends. On what? The headaches. How many pills a day? His silence lasted too long. You don't know. She realized. I don't count them. You should. Something hardened behind his eyes then. You sound like a doctor. You sound like somebody pretending this is normal. The words landed harder than she intended. Rafael leaned back slightly. Not offended. Withdrawn. I didn't come here for a lecture. Then why did you come? Silence. Real silence this time. A man genuinely unable to answer something simple. Finally, he said I couldn't sleep anywhere else. The sentence hit harder because he sounded almost confused by it himself. Matteo stirred awake slightly on the couch and blinked toward the kitchen. You came back again. He mumbled sleepily. Rafael looked at him immediately. And again. Elena saw it happen. The fear loosened. The disorientation softened. Matteo rubbed one eye. You act weird less here. Rafael stayed very still. Elena did too. The boy yawned and pointed toward Rafael's untouched soup container. You always stop eating when your head hurts. Elena frowned. Always. Matteo nodded sleepily. At the diner, too. Rafael looked genuinely startled by that. Not because the boy noticed. Because the boy was correct. How many times have I come into the diner this week? Rafael asked quietly. Matteo started counting on his fingers. Then stopped halfway. I think 4. Rafael looked at Elena. She answered carefully. 6. Rafael stared at the table for several long seconds. Then, very slowly, he asked, was I alone every time Rafael did not come back the next night? Or the night after that? But Elena started noticing the pattern anyway. Not because she wanted to. Because once you saw something enough times, your mind began arranging it whether you asked it to. The headaches. The confusion. The missing time. And always the medication. She realized it during a lunch rush at the diner, while carrying coffee to Rafael's usual booth near the window. He had arrived an hour earlier, looking steadier than before. Cleaner. Sharper. Like he had spent the morning rebuilding himself carefully enough to pass inspection. But halfway through the meal, his hand froze above the table. Just stopped. Rafael's eyes narrowed slightly. Not at anything outside, but inward again. Elena watched him blink once, then twice, as though the room had briefly shifted around him. "You all right?" she asked quietly. "Yes. Automatics." Then he rubbed his temple slowly with 2 fingers. "Migraine." A few seconds later, he reached into his coat pocket for the pills. Elena watched carefully this time. Rafael swallowed one dry without checking the label. The dosage, or even how many remained inside the foil pack. The movement looked practiced, mechanical, a habit built through repetition. 20 minutes later, he forgot he had already paid the bill. That was when the idea settled into her chest hard enough to stay. Not illness. Pattern. That night after Mateo fell asleep, Elena sat alone at the kitchen table, with an old diner notepad beside her coffee mug. She hated herself a little for doing it. It felt intrusive. Dangerous. The kind of involvement sensible people avoided. Still, she wrote down dates. The diner visits. The headaches. The memory lapses. The pills. She stared at the notes afterward and realized something else. The confusion never appeared before the medication. Only after. Her stomach tightened. No. Too simple. Except it kept fitting anyway. The next afternoon, Rafael arrived during rain again. Water darkened the shoulders of his coat. He looked exhausted beneath the calm expression he carried into the diner like armor. But today he was not alone. A second man walked beside him, older than Rafael by several years. Gray beginning at the temples. Clean dark coat. Quiet posture. The kind of man who moved carefully enough that ordinary people never noticed him until they should have already been afraid. Rafael introduced him only because Elena paused beside the table waiting. Victor Salazar. Victor stood and shook her hand politely. Not charming. Professional. His eyes observed too much. Elena Morales. He said, "Rafael talks about this place." Rafael looked mildly irritated by that statement. Victor noticed her noticing. The conversation stayed ordinary after that. Food. Coffee. Business calls Rafael barely touched. But Elena kept watching small things. Victor knew Rafael's order before Rafael spoke. Victor slid a glass of water toward him before the migraine medication came out. Victor watched Rafael take the pills. Not casually, carefully, and when Rafael stepped outside to answer a phone call, Victor remained seated in the booth with his hands folded calmly together. "Elena," he said quietly. Something in his tone made her stop walking. "You've known Rafael long." "No." Victor nodded once, as though that answer relieved him slightly. "He's been under a great deal of stress lately. I noticed. He forgets things sometimes." The way he said it bothered her immediately. Not worried enough. Too prepared. He should see a doctor. She replied. Victor's expression barely changed. "Rafael doesn't trust doctors. That seems smart." A faint smile touched Victor's face briefly. "You'd be surprised how difficult it is to convince powerful men they're human." Elena glanced through the rain-streaked windows toward Rafael, standing outside with the phone pressed against his ear. Even from a distance, she could see tension building beneath his stillness. "He looks tired," she said. Victor followed her gaze. "He's carried responsibility a very long time." Again, not worried enough. No confusion. No urgency. As though Rafael's decline had already been emotionally processed by everyone around him except Rafael himself. That feeling stayed with her long after Victor stopped speaking. When Rafael returned to the booth, he looked distracted. Not confused exactly, more like a man trying to mentally hold on to several moving pieces before they slipped away. Victor stood. "We should go." Rafael frowned slightly. Go where? The silence after that sentence felt microscopic but deadly. Victor recovered first. The meeting downtown. Rafael stared at him 1 second too long, then nodded slowly. Right. Victor did not react outwardly. That bothered Elena most of all. No surprise. No concern. Nothing. As if Rafael forgetting important meetings had already become normal. Rafael reached for his coffee and missed the handle the first time. Tiny mistake. Victor noticed. Elena noticed Victor noticing. The older man stood beside the booth while Rafael gathered himself again. "You all right?" Victor asked. The words sounded correct. The voice underneath them sounded measured. Rafael gave a short nod. "Headache." Victor rested one hand briefly against Rafael's shoulder. Not affectionate. Stabilizing. "We'll shorten the meeting." Rafael looked irritated by that immediately. "I don't need shortening." "Of course not." But Victor's tone carried the same careful patience people used around unstable relatives. Elena saw Rafael hear it too. A flicker of humiliation crossed his face before disappearing beneath control. The two men left moments later. But Elena remained standing beside the booth, long after the diner door shut behind them. Something was wrong. Not only with Rafael, with the way everyone around him behaved about it. That night she unlocked the apartment quietly so she would not wake Mateo. The television glow illuminated the living room faintly, and Rafael was already there, sitting on the floor beside the couch. Mateo asleep against his shoulder. Elena froze instantly. Rafael looked up at her with visible disorientation, as though he himself had only just realized where he was. "I didn't mean to wake him," he said quietly. The boy slept heavily against him without fear, one small hand curled against Rafael's coat sleeve. "Elena," Rafael stopped. His eyes drifted slowly across the apartment. The couch, the television, the kitchen light, then back to her. For a second, real panic appeared in his face. Not violent panic. Lost panic. "I don't remember driving here." Rafael stayed very still after saying it. Mateo shifted slightly in his sleep against Rafael's shoulder. Unaware of the silence tightening around the room, Elena closed the apartment door carefully behind her. "You blacked out." Rafael frowned immediately. "No. You lost time. That's different." How he opened his mouth. Nothing came out. That frightened her more than the sentence itself. Because Rafael Vega always had control over language. Even his silence usually sounded deliberate. But now she could see him reaching for explanations that dissolved before fully forming. Finally, he looked down at Mateo. "I remember leaving downtown," he said quietly. "I remember the headache starting." His hand moved slowly against his temple, as if the memory itself hurt. "Then I remember him opening the apartment door." Elena's pulse quickened. "How long, I don't know." The answer came faster this time. Less denial left in it. Rafael looked exhausted by his own uncertainty now. Mateo stirred awake a few minutes later. Blinking sleepily beneath the television glow, he looked up at Rafael first instead of Elena. "You stayed." The words landed strangely, as though even the child had already begun expecting disappearance from him. Rafael nodded once. "Looks like it." Mateo smiled faintly, then noticed Rafael's expression. "You forgot again." No fear. Just quiet concern. Rafael did not answer immediately. Then yes. Mateo accepted that with painful normalcy. Elena noticed Rafael noticing it too. Something in his face tightened after that. Not anger. Guilt. The boy climbed back onto the couch and fell asleep almost instantly again. Still trusting Rafael enough to turn his back toward him. That trust visibly unsettled Rafael more than suspicion ever had. Elena sat across from him at the kitchen table after carrying Mateo to bed. "You shouldn't be driving." "I know. You shouldn't be carrying a gun either." Rafael looked at the dark counter between them. "I know." The repetition sounded hollow now. Worn down, Elena opened the kitchen drawer slowly and placed the blister pack of migraine pills onto the table. Rafael stared at it. "You left these at the diner." He picked them up automatically, then stopped halfway through the motion. A faint crease appeared between his brows. Rafael turned the foil pack over slowly. Different color. Elena's heartbeat slowed hard for 1 second. "What, these?" He tapped one of the remaining pills lightly. They're usually white. The pills inside the blister pack were pale blue. "You sure?" Rafael frowned again, trying to pull certainty through fog. "I think so." "Think." Again. Elena watched him carefully. "How long have they looked different?" "I don't know." He stared at the medication another few seconds before quietly adding, "I didn't notice." The apartment suddenly felt colder. Elena took the pills back from him carefully. "Who gives these to you, my doctor? You said you don't trust doctors." "I don't." "Then why take medication from one?" Rafael leaned back slowly and closed his eyes for a moment. Headache again. "Victor handles prescriptions sometimes." There it was. Not a dramatic reveal. Just a sentence placed quietly into the middle of the room. And somehow that made it worse. Elena thought about Victor in the diner. Calm. Observant. Prepared. Unsurprised by Rafael forgetting meetings. Prepared. Too prepared. "When did the memory problems start?" she asked quietly. Rafael opened his eyes again. "Months ago. After the medication." His gaze drifted toward the pills. The silence answered first. Then slowly, "Maybe." Elena felt the pattern locking into place now with terrifying simplicity. Headaches. Medication. Confusion afterward. Escalation over time. And Victor always nearby. "You think somebody's poisoning you?" Elena asked. Rafael's face hardened instantly. "No." Too fast. Elena realized he had already asked himself the same question alone. "Elena, you said the pills changed." "I could be wrong." "You said Victor manages them." "That doesn't mean you're forgetting ours." Rafael stood abruptly. The chair scraped hard against the floor. But even now, the anger looked unstable. Not violent. Frightened. "Enough." Elena stood too. "You came here because you don't trust your own mind anymore." His jaw tightened sharply. "I came here because I was tired." "No." Her voice stayed low. "You came here because somewhere inside you already know something's wrong." Rafael looked away first. That told her everything. The apartment became quiet again. Finally, Rafael sat back down slowly. One hand pressed against his forehead. "I had a conversation last week," he said carefully. "At least I think I did." His voice sounded distant now, like he was trying to walk backward through damaged memory. "I remember thinking something wasn't right. With Victor, I don't know." "You forgot." His eyes closed briefly. "Yes." The honesty sounded painful now. Not because he was weak, because he was running out of ways to hide it. Elena looked toward Mateo's bedroom down the hall. "You can't keep carrying this around, my son." Rafael nodded once immediately. No argument. That scared her too. "You're right." The answer came with such exhausted acceptance that guilt hit her unexpectedly hard. Rafael stared at the apartment floor. "When my father got worse," he said quietly, people around him stopped telling him the truth. A bitter edge entered his voice for the first time. They started speaking carefully, watching him carefully. He rubbed one hand slowly over his mouth. "I remember hating that." Elena listened without interrupting. "And now you're doing it to me. I'm trying to figure out what's happening." "No." Rafael looked up at her finally. "You're trying to figure out if I'm safe around him." The sentence stayed between them because it was true. Not all of it, but enough. Elena folded her arms tightly. "You walked into this apartment tonight without remembering how you got here." Rafael looked toward Mateo's room again, and for the first time since she had known him, real fear entered his face openly. Not fear for himself. Fear of what could happen near the child if the missing time became worse. I checked the weapon, he said quietly. What? When I realized where I was, his voice lowered further. First thing I did was check the weapon. Elena felt cold, move through her chest. Rafael noticed. I never drew it. He added immediately. The safety was still on. The fact that he needed to reassure her at all made the room feel unstable. He looked down at his own hands afterward, like they belonged to someone else for a moment. Then came the sentence that changed something permanently between them. Very soft. Almost ashamed. I don't know if I should be alone anymore. Elena stopped breathing for 1 second. Because that was not a mafia boss speaking. That was a man losing trust in himself. The next afternoon, Elena arrived at the diner early and found Victor Salazar already sitting in Rafael's usual booth. Alone. Coffee untouched in front of him. Waiting. Victor looked completely comfortable sitting there. That disturbed Elena immediately. Not because he was threatening, because he looked familiar there. Like he had already been watching this part of Rafael's life longer than she realized. Elena, he said politely as she approached. She kept the coffee pot in her hand. Rafael not with you. Victor's expression shifted almost invisibly. He didn't come home last night. The question landed wrong. Not concern. Verification. Elena felt herself become careful instantly. I didn't say he was missing. Victor leaned back slightly in the booth. Calm. Measured. Rafael has been under pressure lately, he said. Sometimes he disappears for a few hours, and everybody around him acts like that's normal. Victor studied her quietly. Interesting. Not defensive. As if he had expected her to eventually notice too much. He trusts you, Victor said after a moment. Elena almost laughed at that. No, he doesn't. He came to your apartment. The sentence chilled her. Victor lifted one shoulder slightly. Rafael's security people keep track of where he spends time. Security people. Not him personally. A subtle distinction. Elena folded her arms. Then your security people already know something's wrong with him. Victor looked out the diner window toward the rainy street. When men like Rafael begin slowing down, everyone notices eventually. Slowing down. Not sick. Not afraid. Victor kept describing Rafael like damaged infrastructure instead of a human being. You think he's losing his mind? Elena said. Victor turned back toward her slowly. No, he replied. I think he's exhausted. The answer sounded prepared. Too smooth. You don't believe that. Victor's face remained calm. What exactly do you think is happening to him? Elena, there it was. Not denial. Assessment. She suddenly understood something important. Victor was not trying to convince her nothing was wrong. He was trying to measure how much she knew. Elena said nothing. Victor nodded faintly. Rafael has spent 20 years making decisions that kept other men alive. He said quietly. People depend on him remaining strong. And if he can't, Victor looked down at his untouched coffee. Then things become unstable. Not emotional. Not cruel. Worse. Practical. Elena felt cold, settle beneath her ribs, because for the first time she could clearly imagine how Rafael's world saw him now. Not as a man deteriorating, but as a structure beginning to fail. Victor stood slowly. If Rafael contacts you, tell him I'm looking for him. He's not answering your calls. A small pause. No. Victor admitted. Then he placed cash beside the coffee mug and walked out into the rain without drinking a single sip. Elena watched him leave. Everything about him felt controlled except one thing. He had come personally. That meant Rafael disappearing frightened him more than he wanted anyone to know. By evening, Rafael still had not appeared. Mateo sat cross-legged on the apartment floor doing homework, while Elena kept checking her phone despite herself. You're worried, Mateo said quietly. No. I'm tired. That means yes. She almost smiled. Then headlights moved across the apartment window. Black SUV. Matteo stood immediately. Rafael came upstairs slower than usual. The moment Elena opened the door, she knew something had changed. Not physically, emotionally. He looked stripped down somehow. The walls were still there, but thinner now, like maintaining them cost too much energy. Rain darkened his coat again. Always rain with him lately. Elena, he said softly. No confusion this time. He remembered her immediately. That matters, she said before thinking. Rafael looked at her strangely for a second. You disappeared. I know. Victor came looking for you. Something unreadable moved through Rafael's face at that. He say anything. He thinks you're exhausted. Rafael let out one quiet breath through his nose. Humor without warmth. That's generous. Elena studied him carefully. Where were you? Rafael stepped inside slowly. Eyes drifting automatically toward Matteo, sitting on the living room floor. Again. The child anchored him instantly. Matteo looked relieved seeing him. You remembered how to get here, the boy said. Rafael stared at him 1 second too long, then nodded once. Yeah. But Elena caught it. The hesitation. Tiny. Painfully tiny. Rafael noticed her noticing. That seemed to exhaust him more than the headache already pressing behind his eyes. I drove around for an hour first, he admitted quietly. Why? His gaze lowered. I couldn't remember the building. The apartment went silent. Matteo stopped moving completely. Rafael rubbed one hand over his face slowly. I knew the neighborhood. I knew the street. His voice sounded rougher tonight. But every building looked wrong. Elena felt fear move through her chest again. Deeper now, because the deterioration had crossed another line. Not conversations anymore. Places. He was forgetting places. Rafael sat heavily on the couch afterward, while Matteo pretended to keep doing homework nearby. Elena, Rafael said quietly. She turned toward him from the kitchen. I need you to tell me something honestly. The way he said it made her chest tighten immediately. What Rafael looked down at his own hands. When I come here, he paused briefly. Do I seem dangerous? Matteo looked up instantly. Elena did too. Rafael kept staring downward while waiting for the answer, and suddenly she understood the real fear beneath everything else. Not dying. Not losing power. Hurting someone during the missing time. Hurting the child. You've never threatened us, Elena said carefully. That's not what I asked. The honesty in that sentence hurt. Rafael finally looked up at her. And for the first time since she had known him, there was no wall left between the fear and his face, just a tired man trying to determine whether he could still trust himself near ordinary people. I don't know what happens during the gaps anymore, he admitted quietly. Matteo set his pencil down. You wouldn't hurt us. Rafael looked at the boy immediately. How do you know? He asked softly. Matteo shrugged once. You act weird less here. The apartment became still after that. Rafael's eyes lowered slowly. Not because the sentence comforted him, because it almost did, and that frightened him. A migraine hit hard about 20 minutes later. Elena saw it immediately. Rafael's posture tightened. His eyes shut briefly. One hand pressed against the side of his head as though holding something together physically. Matteo started to speak. But Elena shook her head slightly. Rafael reached automatically into his coat pocket for the medication, then stopped. The pills stayed in his hand. He stared at them, long enough for Elena to realize what was happening. He was afraid to take them now. The fear inside him looked worse than the pain. Elena, he said quietly without looking up. If this gets worse, he stopped. Tried again. If I stop remembering things here. His voice lowered further. You don't let Matteo near me. Elena felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Not because he sounded dangerous, because he sounded heartbroken already. Rafael sat there in exhausted silence with the pills resting unopened in his hand while rain moved softly against the apartment windows. And for the first time, Elena realized something terrifying. He no longer trusted the version of himself that existed outside this apartment. The rain finally stopped sometime before dawn. For the first time in days, the apartment sounded still. Not television. No sirens outside. No footsteps in the hallway. Just the old refrigerator humming softly beneath the kitchen light. Elena forgot to turn off before falling asleep at the table. She woke slowly and looked toward the couch instinctively. Rafael was gone. The blanket Mateo had left beside him was folded carefully over the armrest. The apartment door remained locked from the inside again. But this time, something else sat on the kitchen counter. The migraine pills. All of them. Elena stared at the blister pack for several long seconds before picking it up. One small piece of folded paper rested beneath it. Not a note. Just 3 words written in tired, uneven handwriting. Don't trust Victor. She closed her eyes briefly, not because she was surprised anymore, because somewhere between the fear, the missing time, and the exhaustion, Rafael had finally trusted someone else to carry part of the truth for him. A sleepy voice shuffled into the kitchen behind her. Did he leave again? Mateo stood rubbing one eye, hair sticking in every direction. Elena nodded once. The boy looked toward the empty couch quietly. He remembered my name yesterday. The sentence hit harder than she expected, not because it sounded triumphant, because it sounded fragile. Like the child already understood, memory could disappear again tomorrow. Elena crouched beside him and fixed the blanket slipping from his shoulder. You know what? I think she asked softly. What I think he's trying very hard. Mateo considered that seriously. Then he looked toward the apartment door. Do you think he remembers where home is now? Elena opened her mouth. Stopped, because the truth was, she no longer knew whether Rafael's world had ever felt like home to him at all. But she remembered the look on his face every time he sat inside this apartment. The way his breathing slowed near the couch. The way his voice softened around Mateo. The way fear finally reached the surface only after he realized he might become dangerous near the people he cared about. Dangerous men usually protected power first. Rafael Vega protected the child first. Even from himself. Elena looked down at the pills resting in her hand, then toward the quiet apartment still carrying traces of him. The folded blanket, the untouched coffee mug, the silence he somehow left warmer than before. Outside, morning light slowly reached the wet street below, and somewhere across the city, Rafael Vega was probably still trying to remember how to get back to the apartment.